Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. Hey, everyone. It's
Hello.
election season. Muzzy, I can't hear you. I muted you. Hang on. Let me unmute you. No, I can't unmute Muzzy. Maybe Susan can. Maybe Huda can.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, good. I unmuted myself.
Hello.
Where is everybody?
Welcome, welcome. No, we're looking good. I have worked in 5 minutes of late time because I've met people. I know some of them, so I know people will all be 5 minutes late. That's fine. Hey, Kelly and Frank are there. Hi, Kelly,
Hey.
Frankie, Karen, Picani. Oh my gosh, we got all these great people. Linda, our old neighbor. I got Heather Nicely up in here. Serena, super friends. Vince, one of my colleagues, Tiffany, Grant. Oh my gosh, we've got so many great people on here. Okay, I'm very excited. We got Jenny is joining, Susanna's joining. So I did work in 5 minutes of time just for before we launch into the props. While people are joining, I thought I would, talk a little bit about what we're gonna talk about tonight. We are recording this session, as I said we would be. So tonight, we're going to be doing 7 of the props, 7 props, 7 out of 12. Next week, we'll hit the last 5. Part 1 is bonds, taxes, and tax rules, but it's far more interesting than you think it sounds. And then part 2 is voting rights, Uber drivers, and affirmative action. Now, that already sounds pretty exciting. So we'll launch in. The reason it's in 2 parts is because I originally thought this would take longer than it would. I think we can get through these 7 in about an hour and 15 minutes. Those of you who work with me know that I'm usually pretty prompt. So let's see if we can make it work. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, because I got everybody up in here. I got colleagues, I got old work colleagues, neighbors, friends, Romans, countrymen. I've been doing this since 2008. In 2008, of course, I received this thick booklet of propositions. It took a long time to sort through, and it's really hard, and it's really important stuff. And I remember thinking, gosh, I've already done this work. Maybe I should share the work with other people. So I've done this every 2 years since 2008. And what I do is I just review the basics of each one. I strive very hard to be balanced and fair and just present both sides as I do this. Questions, comments, and discussion are very much encouraged. You can unmute yourself. Please don't do that and walk away and get the dog. But you can unmute yourself. So if you have a question or a comment or an opinion, I would love to hear it. I don't have all the answers. Like, I've done a lot of homework, but it's not like I know everything. So I might, if somebody has a question I can't answer, I might ask one of you to Google it. The more perspectives, the better. So this is a very, very important aspect of these meetings when I do them. If we're all in a room with people who agree with exactly what we think, it's not as lively, it's not as vibrant. We want to get as many perspectives and opinions into the mix as possible, which leads me to courtesy and open-mindedness being expected of everyone. In our society, very polarized, as we all know, and I think sometimes we can talk and think that everyone around us agrees with us. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes people who don't agree with us might not want to say anything because they don't feel comfortable. And that's not okay. So in this session, if you have a comment, you have a perspective, I really want to hear it. Just want to make sure that if somebody says something that you don't like, you don't flip out. We just got to be respectful of everybody and open-minded and courteous. I said already I'm recording the session. And just a reminder of you for those of you VISB employees, this is not a VISB sponsored event. I got my friends and family up in here, so it's just an everybody session. Couple of more notes. If you're familiar with some of these props already, and you think you know how you're going to vote, I invite you now to suspend your certainty for the next 70 minutes. one thing that I want to talk about as we get into this is that sometimes you see these propositions, you see a lot of ads on TV, you're going to get a lot of ads in the mail. And it's very clear from the ad which way you should vote, right? Nothing is that clear when we make legislation. So at my company, Susanna, who I know is on the call, Susanna and I make policy for, 340 people at this point. And it's tough because every time we make a policy, we know that it's not going to work for everybody. Now in California, we have 39.5 million people. So with 39.5 million people, there just isn't any law or any proposition you can look at and say, yeah, that's great for everybody. That's my side. It doesn't really work that way. Something that benefits some people will naturally not be beneficial to some other people. That's just the way it works with that many people. That's why I want you to have an open mind. You might think, okay, these people are more important than this, or I'm going to choose to vote this way. Great. Whatever way you vote, good. Get out there and vote. I just want to make sure that we're all being thoughtful about how we vote and not just sort of jump into an assumption. In other words, if you see an ad on TV or if it comes in the mail, don't look at it. It's not real. It's just money. It's just marketing. All right. Last thing I want to give is a big shout out to Ballotpedia. Ballotpedia.org is my friend. They're also your friend. I know we don't have our ballot in the mail yet, so how is it that we're doing all of this? Because Ballotpedia, once things make it onto the ballot, they've got all the information. Neutral, just the way that I'm presenting it here. Most of the content in this presentation is from Ballotpedia. They're a non-profit organization, and I'm sure they would love a donation if you enjoyed this session. All right, let's do the props, you guys. You ready? Yeah, I know. I'm so ready. Let's start with number 14. Okay. Oh, can you put it in presentation mode? Hang on. I thought I am in presentation mode, Huda. Am I sharing the wrong screen? Okay. I also want to give a shout out. I'm going to share again. I'm going to give a shout out to Huda, who is our office IT guru. How about that, Huda? Thank you. So if you have any technical questions, Huda is definitely the person whom you want to Slack. Yeah, you got it? Okay, yeah, wrong screen. Okay, good. We good? Super. All right, Proposition 14. What do we got here? This is the only bond measure that's on our ballot this year. Usually there's more, but this year we've got a bond measure to issue $5.5 billion in bonds for Stem Cell Research Institute. There's a bit of history here, and I'll give it to you. First thing I want to call out, I call out for each one of these. Why is it on the ballot? How did it get there? This is an initiative state statute. It means somebody collected signatures, they got it on the ballot. What does a yes vote mean? A yes vote means that we'll issue $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds for the state's Stem Cell Research Institute. We'll also make changes to the Institute's governance structure and programs because this already exists. A no vote opposes issuing those bonds. I'm going to get into a little bit of history here, but what's going to happen is that this CERM, the Cell Research Institute, will run out of money if we don't give them more money. Let me make sure I'm on the right slide. So, there we go. So here's what it would do. In 2004, we approved Proposition 71. Which issued $3 billion in bonds to finance this institute and establish state constitutional right to conduct stem cell research. Why did we do that? Just a little bit of history. Back in 2004, in the early 2000s, George W. Bush was the president, and at that time, I don't remember if it was an executive order or a law, but it became illegal for federal funds to fund stem cell research. If anyone's interested in knowing why that is, I'd be happy to tell you. But what the state of California said is stem cell research is important. It has the ability to cure a lot of diseases. And so even though the federal government has outlawed it, we're establishing ourselves a constitutional right that we can research it if we want to. So that was pretty big. So flash forward 15 years later, as of October of last year, they had only $132 million in funds remaining. And so they're not taking any new applications for research because they're going to run out of money. So this ballot initiative is kind of a repeat. It's like, okay, we gave you $3 billion, good job, you spent the money, but we want you to keep doing this research, but there are some things that we want to fix. So it would require CIRM to spend no more than 7.5% on operation costs. So why is that? Anytime it's like you donate to a charity or something, you don't want all the money going to administrative costs. You want the money to actually go to the research. The other bond funds would be for programs dedicated to research on therapies for brain and nervous system disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. So what that's saying is we're guaranteeing that $1.5 billion will go to these diseases. Why is that? Because some people who helped fund the first round in 2004 were kind of expecting big things. Yo, we're going to cure Alzheimer's, and that didn't happen. So what they're saying is, hey, okay, if we give you money, certain percentage of this we really want to go to these particular diseases because they're so prevalent in our society. Let's see. Okay, I think that's about all for that slide. So I found an article in the Chronicle that just talked about, has California's bet on stem cell science paid off? That is not an easy answer. We at VISB work at a scientific research company. And you can, scientific research doesn't always work. You have to try a bunch of things and see what kind of progress you can make. So it's not as simple as, hey, we gave you $3 billion and you didn't give me the cures I wanted. Science takes time. We'll go down a few bullet points. It talks about some of the things that they have accomplished. Using stem cells to cure an immune deficiency disease that kills children. People devastated by stroke could be helped by the stuff they're working on now. And there's, a fatal genetic blood disease that involves transplanting stem cells into a fetus still in the uterus. So that's all great. But I think what some of the critics of Prop 71 and this program say is it's not enough. It's a lot of money and you didn't get far enough. The advances that they've made have fallen short of what the original promoters promised. Back in 2004, the reason this got on the ballot, there's a fellow named Robert Klein. He's sponsoring this as well. He's the one who put this on the ballot. He had a son with type 1 diabetes. I can sympathize. I have type 1 diabetes. And stem cell research really has the ability to completely cure this disease. And a lot of people are affected by this disease. And so that's why he put it on the ballot. And that's really what we're hoping for if stem cell research really takes off. And of course, in order for any of that to succeed, in order to get the progress in big diseases, you have to make progress in the smaller diseases. So the steps that they've taken are getting us somewhere, just maybe not where people want it to be. Okay, but here's something important to talk about. A bond is a loan, right? It's saying, well, we don't have the money to fund this out of the tax, so we're going to take out a loan. So one of the things that I always like to look at is, how many loans do we have out? How much interest are we paying right now? So this is from Ballotpedia, of course, because I love them. This is looking at from January of 1993 to June of 2020, 44 bond issues totaling like $188.5 billion. A lot of them were approved for $151 billion. And this kind of shows you a little bit of a history of what's on there, why it's on there, and whether it passed. And you see a lot of red X's, right? Go a little bit further though, that's mostly green check marks. We've taken out a lot of loans. There's only 3 of those that failed. Oh, and then we get up to recent times and more checks than X's. So when you look at our state debt, state has about $80 billion of bonds, which it's already making principal and interest payments each year. In addition, there's another $42 billion of bonds that have not yet been sold, because that's how bonds work. You say, hey, anybody want to loan us some money? We'll give you some interest. People buy them. So that's a lot. And then currently what they estimate, and by the way, this is March 2020, currently they estimate that the state is paying about $6 billion annually from the general fund to repay bonds. So that's out of a total budget of roughly $209 billion. So you just want to think about when you're casting your vote, like, well, is this just about stem cells? Is this about debt? How do we want to balance that? So this is just a general summary. You'll see this, it's pretty repetitive, but I always like to put it in here because the Legislative Analyst's Office always does an analysis of, well, how much is this going to cost us? And here it shows that it looks like about $260 million per year over the next roughly 30 years. So maybe some of us older people might say, yeah, no problem, take out more debt. Maybe some of the younger people say, wait, I'm gonna still be paying that, you know, when you're my age. So it's something to think about one way or the other. People who support it, you'll see a lot of these, you know, Californians for stem cell research. There's a lot of political action committees, a lot of groups they form to support this stuff. But you'll see Robert Klein's name is on there. And this is his argument. You know, he says this holds the promise of curing all of these chronic diseases. The last tactical mile to bring this broad spectrum of therapies to patients will require more funding and the thoughtful support of California's public. So he's basically talking about reducing the suffering of every one of us. Opposition. This gal who says she thinks, and there's been a lot of criticism of CIRM, that it's a very insular society and maybe it's too political. One of the things that she talks about is that there are no longer federal limits on its funding. So President Obama, while he was in office, he undid what George W. Bush did and said, no, it's okay, we can do stem cell research. She says they overpromised. But one of the things that I noted here is that she says California faces an enormous budget deficit. And that's, of course, because of COVID, right? Everything's down, money is down. So what she's kind of saying is, hey, do you want to give money to CIRM when we're already in a budget crisis? Or do you want to invest in other things that you might think we need more? Where's the money? One thing that we always do is follow the money. Who's paying for it? So the support side has gotten about $6.5 million, and the opposition hasn't raised any money. So you might see commercials supporting this. You won't see commercials against it. And these are the top funders. So you see, of course, Robert Klein. And then, as I explained to you, juvenile diabetes research would be very interested in seeing this therapy continue. For those VISB folks, one of our investors, John Doerr, was one of the original contributors to Prop 71 in 2004. You're welcome, that was free. Okay, questions and discussion? Anyone can unmute themselves and let me know if you have feelings or thoughts or want to make a statement or ask a question.
Do we know how much the federal government is putting into doing research now that it is allowed?
We do not. And I will ask, who is that speaking?
Oh, this is Karen Mikami.
Hi, Karen Mikami. We do not know, but why don't you see if you can Google it and find something out and then update us? Karen's like, I didn't sign up for all that. Or you could look it up later. I do not know the answer to that. Was that Malia? All right. Any other comments, questions, discussion? All right, that's Prop 14, you guys. What I want you to do is, you know, the reason I'm doing this early is because I think vote as early as you can. You want to really be prepared. Now you can start thinking about your own questions and be on the lookout for information about this, because as we get closer to the election, there'll be a lot more proposals, there'll be commercials, there'll be all kinds of stuff that come out. So keep your eye out. I'm getting a little bit of background noise. Yes, please mute yourself if you can. Huda, help me out here, girl. I don't know why you all don't. Hey, there's Eileen Moffat. Hi, Miss Moffat. All right, let's do Prop 15. Huda says she can't mute them. Oh my gosh, did I not make you a host? Samuel. It's and Muzzy. Okay, we got it. It's all right. So let's do Prop 15. This one is complicated. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this one. Prop 15 is a change to the tax code. It requires commercial and industrial properties to be taxed based on market value, and it dedicates revenue to certain things. We'll explain what all that means. The highlighting in red is mine. I always am on alert anytime I see a constitutional amendment. So constitutional amendment actually is amending the state constitution. So that's pretty big, pretty important. We should pay attention to that. So what does a yes vote do? Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the no vote. What does a no vote do? Because that will help us explain the current state of things. So what it says is continuing to tax commercial and industrial properties based on a property's purchase price, with an annual increase equal to the rate of inflation or 2%, whichever is lower. So the way things are in the state now, this is for private property, personal houses, as well as commercial properties. We have put a cap on the amount of tax that we charge. So you're not allowed to charge, state is not allowed to charge us any more than 2% tax every year. Can't go any higher than that unless the property is purchased. So once it changes hands, then they'll retax it at the new value. So what does that mean in just terms of like a regular story? Those of you who might not own a home, if the person next door to me bought their home 30 years ago and the home was, $100,000 or whatever, they might be paying $800 in taxes every year because it hasn't gone up more than 2% every year. If I just buy my house here, I could be paying $14,000 or $15,000 per year for taxes. So there really is a real disparity in how we pay taxes. It just depends on when the property changes hands. So the ballot title increases funding for schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing how we do taxes on commercial and industrial property. So this is one of these really, really important things to think about. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called Prop 13, which was passed in 1978. But when you look at who benefits from taxes versus not taxes, one of my sisters owns a house in New York, and she knows that she can't afford to retire in New York because New York doesn't have a cap on taxes. They say is your property when you bought it was worth $260? Oh, is it worth $350,000 now? Man, your taxes are going to go way up. And they just tax her every year, gets higher and higher. And she says, when I retire, I can't stay. I own my home, but I can't stay. So when the taxes are too high, it hurts. It hurts individuals and it hurts businesses. It's tough, especially in our state where the property values are so incredibly high. However, if you don't tax enough, schools don't have enough money. Schools don't have money. The school's got to get money somewhere, and it comes from these taxes. So that's sort of the basics, but I will talk more about Prop 13. So what this would do is it would take the extra money. What it would say is for commercial properties. So let's say my office is in a business park. If our landlord sells that business park, the new owner's taxes will go up because the property has changed hands. So the taxes will be reset. What it's saying is that anymore, we don't have to wait for the property to change hands. Anymore, we can reassess whether it's annually, each county is going to handle it differently, but they're just going to tax based on that market value, which means the taxes can go very high. What it's saying is because it knows that it could hurt small businesses, you see the last bullet point down there, it exempts small businesses from personal property taxes. For other businesses, it provides a $500,000 exemption. What else does it say? Oh, it exempts agricultural land because we don't want to hurt farms. And it says, look, if you own property that's worth $3 million or less, we're not going to do this to you. We'll keep your taxes low, kind of consider you still a homeowner. Right. So one of the things that you'll see, I'll wait till we show the arguments for and against. So fiscal impact is going to be increased taxes on commercial properties worth more than $3 million. That could provide anywhere from $6.5 to $11.5 billion in new funding. That'll go to local governments and schools. Let's talk about Prop 13. This is really important. for those of you who don't know the history here, you can see Howard Jarvis on the cover of Time magazine in 1978. Howard Jarvis, a lot of times when you see bond issues and tax issues on the ballot, you see a lot of who is opposed to it. When you say who is opposed to it, you're going to see the Howard Jarvis, responsible taxpayers. They have a group that started with this guy. And what he said is exactly what I'm talking about. He said, listen, we can't keep taxing people like this. Let's lower the taxes. And this was an incredibly popular ballot initiative. Matter of fact, my wife, Susan, her dad went out there. He got signatures. He collected signatures for it, which is why he pays such low taxes today. I just want to ask Samuel or whomever, if you do have questions you want to ask out loud, ask them out loud. But I don't want to get too far into the weeds because we do have a lot of props to cover tonight. So I don't want to spend too much time on the details. That's always something that you can look up later.
His mic is broken, Kathy.
Oh, his mic is broken?
That's why, yeah. Sorry.
Why? Samuel, I do not know how much of the state's revenue is from property tax, but I'm sure if you look it up, you can post it here. Yeah, Google knows. Google will tell us. So this is basically the crux of Prop 13. Keep taxes low. It encourages people to own property. It encourages business. So I think we covered this. One thing that's important in this first bullet point is that it's only for businesses. It's not for your home. It's just for commercial properties. And of course, it's for people who don't own all that much. I think I already covered all of this. That's good. I'm going to send out this video. I can send out the presentation as well. So this is where we get, I looked up some articles, and this was one I thought was pretty well written. Supporters say it generates millions for schools and governments, but opponents say it'll be catastrophic for business owners. I'm not going to go over all of these numbers, but what I will say is that it's very easy for you to look at in this, say a landlord like Apple who owns their land. Say a landlord like Disney, which will come up in one of the arguments in favor. Disney bought their land. Their land is being based, their taxes are being based on what the market value was in 1975. So they're paying almost nothing. Disney is very rich. So people will tell you, hey, bam, this is a no-brainer. This is easy. All it's going to hurt is super rich, big businesses. That's not exactly true, though. The reason why that's not true is the reason why this hurts small business. And I think I've got something in here. Yeah, this is it. So this here, the second bullet point talks about Walt Disney Studios. Down in the last bullet point, you'll see that this fella says, many businesses who rent property rather than purchase it enter a triple net lease, which means that the renter pays for taxes, insurance, and maintenance, not the property owner. So that's true. When I was working at Electa with some of my former colleagues on the line, we had a triple net lease. Visby, we got a triple net lease. So you want to say, yeah, Disney, you got a lot of money. Bam, I'm going to tax you. But no, actually, this is going to hurt all of our businesses. Anyone who's renting is probably under a triple net lease, which means that those extra taxes that you want to pay and you think you're sticking it to the man, you're actually sticking it to the little guy, and you might not want to do that. I think, this guy talks a lot about Prop 13 in 1978. So one thing that we know, again, being fair and balanced, is that the schools need more money. I don't have the exact statistics. I didn't have time to look it up. But once Prop 13 went into effect, our schools started going way downhill in terms of student performance, just teachers not having enough money, the facilities are run down. So again, it's that balance. Do you tax or do you want money for schools? It's a tough question. This one's complicated. I don't want to go too much into this. I'll share the presentation out, but I think you guys have got the crux of it. So we'll go through who supports it. So look, Cory Booker supports it, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, a lot of people who people on this line like. But I do want to give a note here about leaning too hard on looking for familiar names and who supports it. Because the thing is, you're not always going to agree with what these people say. So you don't want to just blindly support because they support. I think I sent out a quote when I was marketing for this that said, you know, democracy is hard. It takes work. My wife, Susan, sitting here, we've been here for 14 years. We haven't really had our first fight yet, but we disagree. You know, she's my favorite person. We think alike on just almost everything. We don't always agree. I don't even always agree with her. So maybe I don't agree with Kamala Harris on this one. Maybe I don't. So it's really something to think about. Don't just look at a name and say, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, sticking it to the big man. You know, it's complicated, very complicated. Every single law, as I talked about earlier, with 39.5 million people, is going to have consequences in both directions. So don't look at any of these and think easy peasy, because nothing is easy. Make whatever decision you make. I respect that. Just make sure that you really thought about it before you went and cast your vote. Formal officials, a lot of people support this. Everybody wants to raise my taxes. A lot of people support this. ACLU supports it. Chan Zuckerberg, Sierra Club. Arguments. So these are more arguments for it. You know, Chevron getting the same deal as grandma. That doesn't make any sense. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this, only just in the interest of time. Against it. So we've got no on Prop 15, and you'll see down here, look, there's the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. They're going to be in with all of this. Something else I want to call out here. Why would the NAACP be against us? Why would the Small Business Association be against us? Why would the Grocers Association be against us? Because it really will, these tax increases really will be passed down to local businesses. So something you need to know before you vote. Arguments against it, exactly the wrong time. I already talked about this. The opposition. Now look, this is a big money one. This one's big money. You got almost 21 million, and this funding is going to be updated in a couple of days. It's probably more at this point. But you got about 21 million on one side, and you know that you got something going. California Teachers Association. So there's a lot of money behind this. Against it. Realtors don't like it because it'll stop people from property. And then they've collected, you know what, $5.5 million. All right. Questions, opinions? I know I got at least one teacher on the line. Does anyone want to make a passionate plea for getting taxes to our schools? All right. If we don't have anything, I'll keep going. Prop 19 is probably the most complicated we're going to do tonight. So I want to give you a heads up. Prop 19 is going to be complicated. It's going to be hard. It's going to strain your brain. But the first two that we'll do, 17 and 18 in part 2, pretty easy.
Kathy, it's Colin here. I was just going to offer that the one thing that seems to occur, we didn't really mention it very much, but because we don't have as the same kind of tax base in the state as other states, where it's sort of tied to property values because of the Prop 13 limitations. The funding becomes disproportionately sort of dependent upon income tax and other sources, right? So when there's a economic run, as we're seeing, that's great because revenues in the state are high. And when there's a crash, the fortunes of the state also collapse. And so if we remember back in 2008, there were lots of budget overruns and a lot of talk about rainy day funds. And so I don't have any answers for this, but the one question that seems to kind of persist is, has the model that we've chosen for funding the state kind of worked for us through rain and shine? And what do we do if we conclude that not? I mean, we can go with conventional approaches, or maybe there's just a, double down on the rainy day fund approach to things and make sure that we have a really substantial cash reserve so that we can weather our way through the collapse as
Well,
is inevitably happens.
that's a really, really good point. And, it kind of gets to, thank you, Colin. One of the things that it really gets to is that one of the things we're not talking about, candidates. You got a bunch of local candidates on your ballot. You got to do your homework, because I think that's where we don't pay enough attention. Like I'm sitting here doing this whole thing on propositions, right? Oh, everybody knows who's running for president, whatever, whatever, the Senate, whatever, whatever. Who's running for your school board? Who's running for your state assembly seat, right? How are they going to vote? And are they going to be able to come up with a better solution, as Colin says? So one of the things that you'll hear is that Prop 13 is under attack. And it kind of is. We've keep passing additional legislation to pull back Prop 13 to try and level that out. And so it's a big fight in the state. It's a really, really big deal. So thank you, Colin. We're looking pretty good. I think we're running 5 minutes behind, but I think we'll be okay. All right, let's move on. Prop 19. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what. That's what the yes and no looks like. Okay, so let's not go there yet. It's scary, it's very scary. Oh my God, that's so much. Okay, let's not look at that yet. All right, let's just first say that this is another tax, changes tax assessment transfers and inheritance rules. And of course, this is another constitutional amendment. Now, this was actually referred by the legislature, and it will amend the Constitution. And this is going to be another Prop 13 thing. Okay, you guys ready? So hardest one we're going to do tonight. We got this. All right. So like I did last time, we're not going to go through the yeses first. Let's first talk about the no's. Let's just understand what the current state of affairs means. Right now, eligible homeowners can transfer their tax assessments within counties and to homes of equal or lesser value. So now, right now, who that applies to? It applies to people over the age of 55. So let me explain why that is. This was actually an amendment to the Prop 13 thing. Let me explain how this works. So let's say you're 20 years old, you get married, you want to have a bunch of kids, buy a big old house, got 5 bedrooms, everybody grows up there, and your taxes are $800 a year. Kids all move out, if you're lucky, right? Kids are all gone, and now you got 2 people banging around in this giant house. And so you might say, gosh, we're retired, the kids are gone, let's downsize. Let's buy a smaller place just for us. And let's free up this bit of real estate for a family, for somebody else who needs it. But now I don't want to do that, because if my taxes are $800 a year, and I'm 55 and I'm thinking about retiring, well, if I buy a new house, even if it's of lesser value than the current house that I'm living in, my taxes are going to go way up, way up. So you know what I'm going to do now? I have to make a choice. I have to make a choice whether I'm going to maintain this big old house and hang on to this big piece of real estate that a young family could probably benefit from, or I'm going to move and I'm going to pay higher taxes. So that's what this is. What this says is there were laws that were passed before that said, okay, if you're 55 or older, and actually also if you're someone with severe disabilities, doesn't say it in here, but also if you're the victim of, say, a wildfire or natural disaster, what it says is, tell you what, if you buy a house the same value as your current house or something cheaper, I'm gonna let you keep that $700, that $800 tax bill. It's very nice. So it frees up some real estate from some other folks. And it means, unlike my sister who can't afford to retire in New York, I can still afford to retire here. I can downsize and I can afford to retire. All right, that makes sense. But I can only do it once. I can only do it once. The bottom line also, the bottom star of the no, says the tax assessments on inherited homes, including those not used as principal residences, can be transferred from parent to child or to grandparent or grandchild. So what is that about? I bought a house, I own a house, I want to give it to my granddaughter. She's going to live there. That's great. She gets to keep my tax break. It's kind of like rent control, right? She gets to keep the tax break that I got for staying here so long. But let's say maybe I got a little bit of dollars. I bought 2 houses, and one of them I'm using for rental income or just as my vacation home. I'm going to pass that down. I want to give that to my grandchild. So what it's saying is that tax rate will still apply there as well, so that your grandchild can still pay $800 in taxes on your second home, even if they're not living there, even if they're making rental income on it. So now let's look at the yeses. So what does a yes vote mean? So it allows eligible homeowners, so 55 and older, severely disabled, victim of natural disaster, to transfer that tax assessment anywhere within the state. So I want to call that out because right now, there are only certain counties that allow me to do this, right? Once I hit 55, it's not everywhere. This says you can do it anywhere. You can move anywhere in California and you're going to get this. What it also says is that you can also do it on a more expensive home. So now it's not just about I want to downsize. It's I want to move. I want to, I made a lot of money. I want to buy a bigger house. I want to get fancy, but I'm going to keep that $800 tax break that I have. So that's what that's saying there. Then it increases the number of times that I can do this from 1 time to 3 times. So I'm gonna give you spoiler alert on the supporters. Real estate has put money into this. Okay, real estate wants to see this happen because they want to encourage you to sell, 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 buy, sell, right? So now I can do it 3 times. Now to me, that makes a lot of sense. If somebody's a victim of a wildfire and then is a victim of an earthquake, I would love for that person to be able to transfer that tax break. Clearly something terrible. Somebody with disabilities, I agree. But look, once I'm over 55, if I just keep on buying houses, like, should I get to keep that tax break? I don't know. That's up to you. You'll decide in November. Okay, 3rd bullet point. What it says, this is going to change, is that if you inherit a home that's not you're not going to live there, it's not your principal residence, second home or rental, you get reassessed just like anybody else. So I give it to my grandchild. I can't just give it to my grandchild. Then they're going to get, I can, but they're going to get reassessed for those taxes, which currently they're not. And then what it does is it says, if there are any savings, because there's a little bit of savings, a little bit of extra here. So it's like some people get to keep their tax break, but other people will have to pay more taxes. Say, well, if we make any money from this, then we'll take that revenue and we'll put it to wildfire agencies and counties. All right, how's that looking? Does that make sense? What do you think, Susan? Does that make sense? Susan gets it. She's a smart cookie though. So, all right, we'll just keep going. Let's see what it says. So I pulled some stuff from the Mercury News, and again, we're talking about Prop 13, right? So this is all about Prop 13. Prop 13 passed in 1978. It was a different state at that time. We were a far more conservative state than we are now, a far more liberal state now. And also the state was in, this was an experiment. We tried it. So a lot of people think this experiment failed and we have to change it. And this is part of it. Every 2 years, you're going to see things that are going to try to roll back Prop 13. So I'm not saying that's good or that's bad. It just means you got to think about the larger implications because this is complicated. No easy answer here. If you think there is, no easy answer. Okay, inherited tax breaks, we talked about that. Yeah, so actually this is going through all like props that were, so in 86, we passed 58, Prop 19, we passed Prop 60. This is all the stuff that I really just went over. 2 years ago, I'll call out, so like I said, every 2 years you're gonna see something like this on here. 2 years ago, real estate industry spent $13 million on a campaign just to take that 55 and older break. And instead of doing it just by county, they wanted to do it through all of California. And that failed. So every 2 years, you're going to see these on the ballot. Right. We went through this. Great. All right. Now, this is just a summary that you'll always see. Fiscal impact. Local governments could gain money. Schools could gain money. And most of the revenue would be spent on fire protection. Yeah, so this is actually, I will send out this presentation. This is actually this is from Ballotpedia. It's going through every single thing since Prop 13 that has kind of dialed back Prop 13 a bit. So you can see there, there's a bit of it, and people continue to try. And this is just, I thought I'd put this map in here because it's kind of cool, that shows which counties allow those inter-county transfers. Like you see, that's us over here. We got a little bit down here. But most of the counties in California don't allow you to transfer that tax break down there. So that's pretty interesting. Oh yeah, I think we went through that. So much info. Money. $19 million. $19 million, mostly put together by realtors to get this passed. And again, there's no money for the opposition, which means you might see commercials and get stuff in the mail about, you know, do it, do it, do it, vote yes. But, you know, it's not like there was a big group that came out with opposition. So you always just need to make sure you're keeping a fair and balanced mind when you see these ads. So that's for support. People who are against it are saying it's an attempt by real estate interests to accomplish what they couldn't do 2 years ago by pandering to the state's firefighters union. So that's kind of what they're saying. They're saying the way they wrote it is that because most of the money will go to fire protection, they're sort of making the firefighters get behind it so that the firefighters will get their unions to have everybody vote for it. So what they're saying is, we see what you're doing, you're just doing it to pander, we don't like it. So that's the opposition against. Mercury News and East Bay Times editorial board said something a little bit similar to what kind of the point that Colin made, that it's time for holistic reform. Like Prop 19 plugs one hole, but it creates another, right? There's this constant push and pull, give and take, and it's time for us to really think about what we're doing and reassess. That's pretty much all I have on 19. That's the most complicated one. It's just so complicated. What questions and discussion does anyone have? Does anyone think they know how they're going to vote on this one? What do you think, Kelly? You know how you're going to vote on this one? Oh, he can't unmute himself. Oh, no, he can't. I bet I can unmute you. No, you're a no. You're a no. You're like, no, no way. Yeah, okay. Hey, Huda, is it too late to assign someone as a co-host? No, it's not too late. It's not? Breakout rooms, chat, how do I do it? You should be able to click my name and make me a co-host. I'm gonna try to do it. Go
Kathy, can you hear
I'm
me?
in participants. Who's that?
This is Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. Okay, I have a question. You mentioned that it would change back that if you're transferring real estate to a family member, they would be reassessed, the tax current value on the property, but currently they're not.
Yeah,
right?
so right now what it is if it's their second home, let me go back a bit here. Huda, I made you co-host up in there. Let's go back in time, go back. So right now, yes, inherited homes, right, okay. Not used as, so basically if you transfer it to your child and they're gonna live there, they get to keep the taxes. But if they're gonna not live there, if it's a rental or a second home, then they'll be reassessed on market value. Did that answer your question?
Okay, yep.
Okay, good. I was trying to figure out how to make Huda the host when you asked, so I was only half listening. But we got this. All right, that's Prop 19. How are we doing on time? I estimated we should be done with Prop 19 at 7:46. Pretty good. We're only 2 minutes behind you guys. We got this. All right. Oh, hang on. I got another slideshow for you. Hang on. Remember, I made 2 presentations, so we're going to go to part 2. I'm going to put it in presentation mode. And I'm going to, oh, look, now I can see you all. It's so nice to see your smiling faces. How exciting. Hello, hello. Area code is there. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. All right, we're sharing. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, we got 4 left. You're going to be really excited about the first 2 because you might not know yet how you're going to vote on it, but they're super easy to understand. No more taxes. All right, here we go. Here we go. And I just want to give another shout out to ballotpedia.org. Ballotpedia.org, fair, balanced, nonprofit, could use your money if you're enjoying this presentation. All right, Prop 17. Let's talk about Prop 17. Prop 17 restores the right to vote to people convicted of felonies who are on parole. Of course, bing, 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 we've called this out. This is a constitutional amendment, so we always want to be on high alert. It's going to amend the Constitution. So a yes means that it will allow people on parole to vote, and a no vote means that they can't. Right now, in the state of California, if someone is convicted, if you're convicted of a felony, you go to jail. You cannot vote while you are in prison, cannot vote while you're in there. And then you come out, you're on parole. So you're out, but they're watching you. You're still on parole. If you slip up, you could go back at any time. In that period, California says you still can't vote. Your prison sentence isn't over. It's kind of like crime and punishment, right? So you committed the crime. Part of your punishment is you don't get a vote. So you don't vote while you're in prison. Does that parole piece also count? Is basically what you're voting on. They already can't vote while they're in jail. Can they vote once they're out on parole? Fiscal impact. The fiscal impact is cute here. Increased costs for voter registration and ballot materials. It's basically just so that we can register everyone. So it's not a high cost, no big deal. But this is a pretty interesting topic. Now, I already said, I already went through what that does, but I like this map. This is pretty cool because this is a big fight. I don't know if you guys remember, but 2 years ago in Florida, Florida was one of the states who, there are states who, once you go to prison for a felony, you never get to vote again. You never, ever get to be part of the legislative process. Florida was one of those states where you could, like this calls out here, there's a couple of states like this, where you could petition the governor and say, I want to vote, will you let me? And in Florida 2 years ago, there was a big ballot initiative that said, you know what, it shouldn't be forever, and it shouldn't have to be the governor who decides who gets to vote. So in Florida, they turned that over and they said, no, we're saying that once you get out of jail, you can vote. And that's still being legislated. There are still court cases over that. So what Florida did after that, and this was just such an interesting thing, I like to pay attention to this stuff. What Florida did after that is they said, yeah, but not until they pay all their fines. They owe us money for this, they owe us money for this. They still can't vote until they pay us. So it's something that people fight about. Voting rights is something that people really, really fight about. And I like this map because it highlights, so California is one of 3 states that require us to complete their prison and parole before we're gaining the right to vote. 19 states allowed people convicted of felonies, but who were on parole to vote. So that would be us. If we pass this, now it'd be 20 of those. Right, 17 didn't, right. Maine and Vermont allow people who are imprisoned to vote. So this is another one of those things that I like to show the disparity between the states because it's not just an obvious answer. So again, you might need to think about how you want to answer on this, but what it says and what it does is pretty clear. So I like that. It's just the wording of the law. Who supports it? So you got, Kamala, you got, a lot of D's. I see a lot of D's there. Legal Women Voters, ACLU. Opponents, we have this fellow who's a state senator. And, just to read some of the arguments against, like this fella is saying, like, look, this is a murderer. This is rape. This is someone who committed a terrible crime. He's saying part of their sentence is to complete their parole period. So it's fair. If we don't let them vote while they're in prison, don't let them do it while they're on parole. Some of these are pretty bad people, is what he's saying. So what I'm saying is the Election Integrity Project is basically saying they haven't made full restitution. While on parole, their liberties, their movement, association, their activities, even ownership of certain items are still heavily restricted and regularly monitored. Any misstep will send them back. So what they're saying is they have not fully regained our trust, which means that they shouldn't have the right to vote until they actually make it out of that parole period. Does that make sense? What? No money? It's very rare that you see zeros across the board. This is just one of those things. You're not going to see ads for this. You're not going to see anything come up in your mailbox. You just got to think about it on your own. Okay. Any thoughts? Anybody know how they want to vote on this one? I'll tell you a secret. I still don't know how I'm going to vote on some of these. You know, I've read about them. These are hard problems. Do I have a question?
No, this is Kelly. I'm with Maine and Vermont.
Just to let them vote while they're in there, right? Because they still live here, right?
Yep.
Yep, I agree with that as well.
All right. Anyone have a differing viewpoint that they would like to offer? Because that will be respected here. All right. Let's go to Proposition 18. Another easy one to understand. I still don't know how I'm going to vote on it, but it's at least easy to understand. So this is what this does here. This would allow a 17-year-old who will be 18 at the time of the general election to vote in the primaries and the special elections. And of course, ding, 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 we're calling out, it's another constitutional amendment, so it's going to change the Constitution. We're always on high alert for that. So 17-year-old right now, what it's saying is, hey, look, they're 17 in March, but they're going to be 18. They're going to get to vote in a general election. What this is saying is, why not give them the opportunity to decide who they're going to vote on? Because currently you're 17, you get to the general election. Oh, great, this is what I'm stuck with. I got to get stuck with these candidates. Other people picked them for me. Why don't I get to pick? So vote in the primary. So that's pretty much what's that saying. It expands the voting right. It says if you're going to be able to vote in a general, you should be able to vote in the primary. There's a certain amount of sense. You know, I can see arguments on both sides. There really aren't, people didn't submit a lot of arguments on both sides. You can certainly see, you know, plenty of 17-year-olds. I mean, I know 15-year-olds who are so up on current events. I'm like, hey, can they vote now? And you have, you know, 25-year-olds who don't know, you know, what they're going to do. And, you know, they seem irresponsible. And you're like, should they be voting? Who decides? We get to decide in this case. Is there a big difference if there's an 8-month age difference? Are they that much more mature when it gets to November than they will be in March? I don't know the answer to that. So I'm going to check the chat. I saw a little chat flash. What do we got on chat? No, I can't see it. Hang on. Why also the special elections? Good question, Samuel. I don't know. Why you got such good questions I don't know the answer to. I didn't look that one up either, Samuel. I don't know. Does anyone have any, let's see what else is in here. Yeah, increased cost for voting materials. Updating, yeah. So it's not a lot of money we're talking about here. It's just the administrative. Oh, is there a map? No. But I did want to look up, do other states allow 17-year-olds to vote? And yes, 18 states, along with DC, have this in their system. So we wouldn't be the trailblazer here. Other people are doing it. Questions? Discussion? All right, cool. So we got 2 left, you guys. We're doing really great. This is super exciting. I'm so happy you're all here and I get to share this all with you. All right, let's talk about Prop 22. I have to be honest here. I tried very hard to give a fair and balanced viewpoint on all of these. I do not have a fair and balanced viewpoint on this one. I'm going to do my best, but I'm not fair and balanced on this one. So I'm just giving you that disclaimer right up at the outset. I'm not going to tell you. I'll let you guess which way I want to vote on it. So Prop 22 considers app-based drivers as independent contractors and enacts several labor policies related to app-based companies. So we're talking about Uber drivers, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, all of this stuff. So this is a initiative state statute, which means that they collected signatures, they put it on the ballot. So yes, bill allows them to define app-based drivers as independent contractors and adopt new wage policies. And a no means that an existing law that was passed last year, AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, will continue to be used to classify app-based drivers. There's a lot of history on this one. So what it does, and in the ballot title itself, it gives you a hint. It exempts app-based transportation and delivery companies from providing employee benefits to certain drivers. So really what it does is it exempts these companies' employees from California labor law. I'm in HR now. California labor law is pretty complicated. I can understand why people would want to be exempted from it. But it is interesting to pass a law that says, hey, these companies don't have to participate. So what it does, okay, they can use their independent contractors and non-employees. So I think probably everybody here knows a little bit about this, but this is all about the gig economy. So, in 2007, the whole world experienced a revolution when we came out with smartphones. Thanks, Apple. So now everything is in the palm of your hand, and we use our phones for everything. And one of the things that we found, companies like Uber and Lyft, is that you can actually do crowd sharing, crowdsourcing. You need a ride? I have a car. Let me take you, and I get paid for it. Now, these people who work for these companies are not employees. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because I already have a job. Let's say I have a day job. And, Uber, I just want to Uber drive at night just to earn a little bit of extra money. I don't need to be treated as an employee. I'm an independent contractor. And that's sort of the gig economy. It's like, I want to work a few hours here. I want to work a few hours here. I'm just going to take this gig. I'm in the car. I get to decide to decline that trip. So I get in my car. The company doesn't tell me what time to start work. Doesn't tell me which rides to accept. Doesn't tell me what area I have to drive in. I have a lot of choices here, and that's one of the benefits of the gig economy. But what started to happen is that for a lot of people, it's the only work they could get, and they are working for these companies, and they don't have workers' comp, and they don't have, health insurance. And so what's happening is, while the gig economy, again, things are complicated, helps a lot of people by allowing them to do little bits of work here and there and earn some extra dollars, side hustle. On the same token, it means that there's a lot of people who aren't protected by labor laws, because as independent contractors, there is no workers' comp, right? You work for yourself. No health insurance. There's no paid time off. You get sick, too bad. So it's complicated, and there's been a lot of fights about this. And the fights are why this is on the ballot. So I am always going to be casting an extra eye on any ballot initiative that came out of a fight that somebody's having with somebody else. Because what I'm thinking is, do I really need to decide this? Or should someone else? Should the legislature decide it? All right, so what else does it do? So independent contractors wouldn't be covered by various, like no minimum wage, no overtime, unemployment insurance, all of that stuff. They don't get any of that. But what they're saying is they would be entitled to other comp, including minimum earnings, healthcare subsidies, and vehicle insurance. So say, no, you won't get this, but we'll help you out with some other things. And then it restricts certain local regulation. So what this does is, right now, these rideshare companies, they are having a bit of a problem because cities enact different rules. Say, well, no, Uber, you can't do this here, and in San Francisco, but in Santa Cruz, they say you can. In Orange County, they say something else. What this saying is, for the whole state, too bad. Local governments don't get to decide. It also criminalizes the impersonation of drivers. And no, I did not look up why that's on there, but it is. So minor increases in state income taxes paid by rideshare. Hey, there's a typo in there. That's not mine, it's Ballotpedia's. You see why they need your donation? Okay, let's keep going. So I found a good article from Mother Jones talking about AB 5. So when they passed AB 5 last year, what the legislature tried to do is say, forcing gig companies to consider their drivers as full employees, not contractors, to give them benefits and bring them into the official workforce, part of labor laws. So that's great. This initiative doesn't repeal that law. It just goes around it and says, yeah, that's fine for other companies, but for my kind of company, yeah, we don't want to play. So Prop 22 gives app-based drivers the freedom to work. Right. What the Uber and Lyft are saying is the worker has control of their hours and their ability to turn down work. They're independent. That's how we classify them. Right. And it guarantees them new benefits. So discrimination protections, health benefits, and an earnings floor. So you have to earn at least this. So they're saying this is a new progressive framework. So the idea is that the gig model is not a misclassification of workers without benefits, but innovative job creation in need of a few tweaks. So this is where it gets interesting. So Prop 22 states that drivers would earn at least 120% of the local minimum wage, a pay bump. But there is this NELP is, it's in here, the National Employment Law Project. It says, well, it just depends on how you calculate it. It could actually decrease their wages by $500 a week. The reason is the hours worked. So what Uber is saying is the time that they count, they don't count the time when I go into my car and I'm ready to take a ride and I clock in. It's not how it works. I'm sitting in my car, I'm looking at the rides, I decide which one to take. It's only when I'm actually driving that time counts. So that's an important distinction to think about, because you will see ads on TV for this if you haven't already, where they're basically saying, hey, we're going to pay them 120%. Think about it though, it's engaged time. And in fact, one of the folks on the call, Dina, is a flight attendant for American. And Dina was the one who taught me that under union rules for American Airlines, it's kind of how it works for them too. So when you go to the gate, you take an American flight and they're helping you at the gate, like they're not actually getting paid for that time. It's only once they get on a plane takes off that they're paid for that time. So it's engaged time. So the way that they classify engaged time is not something new that they just made up. Other industries do it. So again, it talks about health benefits, but those health benefits are dependent on that engaged time. So they say, hey, if you work 24 hours a week or more, we're going to give you health benefits. You actually do have to be working full time in order to get those health benefits, according to the people who did these studies. So, right. And this is what I talked about. This takes away any power that local governments have to control how these people are classified. So it basically exempts these companies from labor laws, is what it amounts to. We talked about that. I will say AB 5 was passed last year. It wasn't the best legislation ever written. It ended up having some deleterious effects on some other groups who really are independent contractors and don't want to be employees. It's not a perfect law. So all I will say, again, I can send out this presentation, but there's a lot of lawsuits that are going on around about it. So there's lawsuits, fight, and now there's this proposition. It's all part of a big fight. Who's behind it? Actually, I'm going to show you. We already talked about this. So these are some real specifics about what it requires and what it's offering to do. But I really want to get to the money. So who's in support? Corporations, DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, Instacart, and Postmates. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting though, you'll also see in the organizations, the NAACP. Why would the NAACP? Why would the National Black Chamber of Commerce say, why are they in there? Well, part of the thing that happens is that sometimes when cities, I think this happened in Austin, I might have a slide on this even, sometimes when cities put controls in and they say, you know what, if you don't want to say we can classify them as independent contractors, we're just not going to drive in your city. You don't get to use Uber because it costs us too much money. So Uber also needs to make a profit. What they're saying is the entire business model rests on these people being independent contractors. Because if we have to pay all this insurance and we have to hire them as employees, we can't afford it. So if we can't afford it in California, we might just decide, yeah, we don't need to be here where else. You can have your silly labor laws, we'll drive somewhere else. So what that means is that part of the gig economy will be gone because there are people who need that gig. They need to make that extra money. So what happens if we turn this down, make them play the game with labor laws, and then they pull their drivers? So just like anything, trying to be fair and balanced, it does have effects, and you just never know what those effects are going to be. Arguments. So this is and this is basically what they're saying. App-based driving is under threat. We need to end the uncertainty and make sure that people understand where they stand, because there is a lot of uncertainty because of all these lawsuits. If this passes, it'll clear that up. It could significantly limit the availability and affordability of these services, because if Uber decides to stay in California, if we don't pass this, they might raise their rates, you know. And then, of course, the CEO of Uber argues that Uber would only have full-time jobs for a small fraction of our current drivers and only be able to operate in many fewer cities than today. Rides would be more expensive. So it's all the stuff that I've just been talking about. Who opposes it? Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden. We've got some unions, and then we have an organization called Gig Workers Rising. Arguments against, right? No? Yes, arguments against. These are people saying these are billion-dollar corporations who just don't want to offer with their employee what other employees have. And pretty much everyone's saying the same thing. These guys lost in court, and this is their only way to do what they want, is basically what they're saying. Take a look at the money on that one. Did you say $111 million? Was I just gawking at 20 million in one of the previous props? $111 million is a lot of money. So that's another thing I always look out for when I'm looking at these props. It's like, if somebody's going to put that much money into it, then they're going to make just as much. It's because they're going to make a lot of money. Money shows money. If it's worth that much to them, then it's all about the money. Very interesting. And who did it? It's Lyft, Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, and Postmates. So they've all thrown down a lot of dollars to try to get this done. And look, I get it. Their entire business model is based on having these folks as independent workers. And if that gets taken away, it really hurts. It destroys their whole business model. So I get it. No, we only have about $2 million. Not too many people. 2 million isn't much in this world. But I thought also, this is from Ballotpedia. This is why I love Ballotpedia, because just as I was sitting there thinking, I'm going through my web and I'm like, 111 million, is that a lot? Of course, it shows me what are some of the most expensive ones we've had. So we've had other ones that have been pretty expensive. You know, Prop 79 in 2005, like there's all kinds of stuff that gets this expensive. Interesting though, when you look at some of the most expensive ones, in only one of them did all that money result in a yes. So it looks like people are like not just convinced by money. So that's kind of exciting, interesting. This is all about AB5. What I want to call out here is that ABC law. So this is how AB5 works. Basically, it says you can classify them as an independent contractor under these circumstances. They're free from control and direction in connection with the performance of their work. The person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So what does that mean? So I work for a medical diagnostics company. So let's say I bring in an independent contractor to do events for my office. No problem, they're an independent contractor because my main business is not events, it's medical diagnostics. So that's the kind of thing that means. And then C, the person is customarily engaged in independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. Person is customarily, right. So what it's saying is they do this anyway. So maybe I'm a cab driver and I can't get enough hours at my taxi company. So I'm just going to take this second gig, but this is what I always do. So I'm an independent contractor. So what I said about the law earlier, it's a little bit wonky the way it was written. It didn't work out that well, and that's why there are so many lawsuits around it. Another lawsuit, basically, well, just statements saying why they suspend their rideshare services. And this is the slide I have about Austin. So they pulled their operations in Austin. Austin was like, no, you can't do this. And they're like, fine, we won't drive in Austin. And now they came back. So basically what happened is the governor signed a statewide ordinance, kind of like this, that said local cities don't get to decide. So Uber is now driving in Austin again, but Austin doesn't get to decide. So if you're someone who's a proponent for more local government control, then you'll want to make sure you vote no on this if that's your thing. Another lawsuit. All right, questions, discussion? Any gig workers out there want to give their 2 cents? Okay. Oh my gosh, you guys.
So I did not catch where you stand on this, Kathy.
Oh, you
Can you
didn't?
share? No.
Wait, who is that? Who's that talking?
This is Julie.
Julie, you didn't catch it? I will contact you separately. I really like to try and be fair and balanced. I'm very excited that you didn't catch how I stand on
You
this.
did a good job.
Thank you. I don't know, Julie. See, that's my wife yelling. Even I don't know, Julie. And Julie, it's nice to hear your voice. I haven't seen you in a while. All right, last one for tonight. It's fairly simple to understand, but very hairy and difficult to sort out. This one. So this is really interesting. Proposition 16 is all about affirmative action. So we passed in 1996, Prop 2009, which says the state cannot discriminate or grant preferential treatment based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in public employment, education, or contracting. So what does that mean? If you apply to the UC system, the UC says, hey, we're not going to take your color into account. Like, we're just going to take your academic standards, you know, you're volunteering, you play the trombone. We don't care what color you are or where you're from. That's how it is right now, based on that Proposition 209 back in 1996. So a yes vote says, we don't like that. We want to put affirmative action back in government here in California. So a yes means a yes for affirmative action, and a no means a no. A discrimination is discrimination, and we don't want to take anything into account. This one's hard. This is hard. So yeah, it allows diversity as a factor. Right. Not a lot of fiscal impact here. This is all about how you think we should choose where people get to go and what people get to do. So this is a constitutional amendment. Right. This is affirmative action. I will start with a little bit of just kind of some, I don't know if it's history, but just an anecdote. Like, there's a fellow who wrote a book called Almost Black. And this is a fellow of Indian descent. He grew up in the United States. His parents are from India. He's got dark skin. And he was applying to a lot of different schools all across the country. And he had great grades. He had a great resume. He wasn't getting in. So he did something kind of radical. What he did is he kind of buzz cutted his hair so you couldn't see what kind of hair he had. And on his applications, he reapplied at a lot of places and said, I'm Black. And he got in. He got into his top school. And so this guy is going to say, this guy is a no on Prop 16, because he says, look, discrimination is discrimination. The whole thing with affirmative action is there fair and equal treatment? So I think the UC system is a really good place to start. So if I have, say, a Black student or a gay student or whatever it is, who has a similar resume or a slightly lower resume than somebody who's white or Asian, then I might give this person a spot instead of giving the white person or the Asian person a spot, because I want to increase diversity in my schools. Now, the thing about affirmative action is that anytime you say, we're going to say yes to this person and move them up, you say no to somebody else. And you say, well, why would you do that? I recently had someone, close friend say, well, I don't understand why we need affirmative action. She said, I wasn't given any benefits. I had to work for everything I had. Everyone should have to earn their way. And there were a couple of points that I made to her, which is, it's not exactly equal, because I said, if you had someone who's, say, Black, say a Black man, who had the exact same experience as you, same socioeconomic background, same school, same everything. The thing is that when they go to apply for that job, it's possible that you're more likely to get the job even if you have the same resume because of unconscious bias, right? There's outright discrimination. Sometimes it's unconscious, whatever it is. The other thing when you talk about schools, though, is that when you look at, say, poor neighbors, low-income neighborhoods versus rich neighborhoods, we know there's a difference in the quality of the education. So when you look at people who live in low-income neighborhoods, great majority of those people are Latinx and Black people. They didn't have the opportunity to get that resume that somebody else in a more affluent area got. Another thing that people in affluent areas can do is get tutoring for their SATs and whatever new tests that they have to take. Another thing they can do is pay for piano lessons. Look, my kid's a concert pianist, let him in, right? So their resume is gonna look better, but is it really fair? So if you've got, someone, if you wanna look at people like this, maybe you have a person of color and you have a person not of color or a person of Asian descent, it really isn't necessarily equal playing ground. And that's what people are saying with affirmative action. So in 1996, basically what the state said is like, hey, we're cool. Things are fair enough now. We've made it far enough that we don't have to use these kind of artificial, we're going to force these people in. We don't have to take that into account because it's fair enough as it is. And what these people are saying, and there's plenty of arguments on both sides for this, is discrimination is discrimination. Because if I'm that kid who's disadvantaged or a person of color, and I didn't have those opportunities to build up that resume, maybe I have a job. Maybe I can't take trombone lessons because I'm working. I don't feel like it's fair if there's no affirmative action. I need that little extra, just that little extra push is all I need, and I'm going to make it. But now if you have somebody in an affluent area or a white kid, and they have worked their ass off, like that Indian fella who really worked his ass off and his resume was great. It's not his fault that he might have had other advantages. And maybe he didn't have that many more advantages. It's just not his fault, but he's going to get that no because we have discrimination based in the system. So sometimes discrimination can be good if we feel like, hey, we want to increase diversity. We want to give people an extra chance. But you also have to remember that certain people will be left out of that equation. So this is one of these propositions that's easy enough to understand, very difficult to decide. One of the things that I meant to look up, but I didn't have time, is, the UC system currently doesn't take race into account. So what's the diversity in the UC system? Like, how's it doing? And I don't know. That's something that we can all look up after. So I've got more on these slides, but just wanted to kind of give people a little bit like, hey, here's both sides of this. Because again, this is one of those things that you can look at and say, easy peasy, baby. I'm a yes. It's not easy. Nothing is ever that easy. All right. So I think I just covered this. But one of the things down on bottom that this assembly person, Shirley Weber, is saying is that when we look at the COVID pandemic, we see that less affluent people, disadvantaged people really are taking it in the chin. And it kind of shows that we have far-reaching institutional failures that keep people down, and we need to fix it. And she's also, of course, saying like, hey, we've had a lot going on. People are still protesting Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and it's really made some people think about things that they haven't thought about before. Like, is it really equal in our society? So there's a lot of debate about this sort of thing right now. And of course, this was on the ballot before any of the George Floyd thing happened. But it's really interesting in light of recent events. You can see why a lot of people would be very supportive to put this in place. Right, so federal law would define the parameters of affirmative action. Right, higher education, government contracting, it has to be under strict scrutiny. So what it's saying is that you can do it if it's narrowly tailored to address that interest. But they have said that you can't have quotas and point systems. So what they're saying is you can't say, hey, I got to take 1,000 Black people for this class, no matter what. So you can't have quotas. What you're saying is you can at least take it into account. You can look at it as a factor. If you've got a bunch of people who are kind of in the same spot, you can look at it, you can take it as a factor, but you can't do quotas. It's pretty interesting. All right, supporters. We got a lot of D's up in the supporters, but again, don't just look at the D and say, I'm a D, I support. I really want you to think about the position that you want to take here. More supporters, a lot of D's. Good to see Mike Honda's name in there again. Ro Khanna took his U.S. representative seat, but he's a good guy. Who else? All right. Oh, we have more. ACLU, NAACP. A lot of people support this. Arguments. I know about discrimination. I live it every day. Quit lying to yourselves and saying race is not a factor. The bedrock of who we are in this country is based on race. It is true that when we are our best selves, we don't discriminate, but it's true. Every group that has come in has faced some sort of discrimination all through history, as a matter of fact. Right. This gal is saying that Prop 109 was kind of a trick. There were a lot of conservative policies that were put in place during the late 80s and mid 90s and stuff. This is interesting. So the UC president, Janet Napolitano, basically says it makes little sense to exclude any consideration of race in admissions when the aim of the holistic process is to fully understand and evaluate each applicant through multiple dimensions. So Prop 209 has tied their hands because they're trying to address racial inequality without factoring in race, even where allowed by federal law. So that's her. So this is, right, so colleges consider this and that, but they can't consider your color or your origin or any of that. What this person is saying, Otto Lee, former mayor of Sunnyvale, is saying that, again, with recent events, a lot of people have experienced discrimination. And is he for or against? Gosh, I've lost my arguments. Is it arguments for or against? I don't know. It's almost 8:30, you guys. Can you see I'm a little tired? I have a hard job. All right, we have more arguments. Who's opposed? A few folks, a couple of R's. American Civil Rights Institute, Chinese American Civic Action Alliance. So you see a lot of Asians who are against affirmative action because there was a high percentage of Asians in our schools and governments in proportion to the population. Arguments. I think we have a lot of time to go through these. I will send out this presentation. But you see how many arguments there are? My goodness, my goodness. Support. So we're not looking at a lot of money here. Like 3.2 million, 122,000. So this isn't a big money thing. This is one of those that's just a concept thing. How do you want things to work? Opposition, Students for Fair Admission. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or discussion about Prop 16? That's okay, you don't have to. It's 8:28. I have one more slide for you guys. I hope that you'll be able to join us next week. Coming up next week, it's again, same bat time, same bat station. The first presidential debate is taking place at almost the same time. Just catch up on tape delay. We're going to be talking about rent control again. We talked about it in 2018. Dialysis again. We did that one in 2018. And consumer data privacy. That one's complicated. And then we're going to talk about prison sentencing and cash bail. These are really weighty issues. Very, very interesting stuff coming up next time. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Does anyone else have anything else? We have 2 minutes left.
Thank you very much. This was super helpful and you were a great host.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. a lot.
Ditto.
You did a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you all so much. It's so lovely to see my coworkers and my friends and all of my former colleagues. It's great to see all your faces. And I am happy if this helped even one person, it is worth the work I put into it. So thank you all so much. And hopefully I will see you guys next week.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.